Every motorcycle has risk, but these 13 machines took that risk to extremes, with fatal flaws, unstable handling, and power delivery that defied physics. They turned riding from a thrill into a survival test. Today we're counting down some of the most dangerous motorcycles ever built. Number 13, the Suzuki RD500 Gamma, a machine that brought race bike tech straight to the streets before the streets were ready. This two-stroke legend was born from Suzuki's Grand Prix success in the 1980s. With its exotic square 4 engine, aluminum box section frame, and barely legal styling, the RD500 Gamma was essentially a GP bike with mirrors and turn signals, and that made it both glorious and genuinely dangerous. The 498cc square 4 two-stroke produced blistering power, but it didn't deliver it smoothly. Below 6,000 RPM, it felt tame. Twist past that, and it hit like a sledgehammer. The sudden surge in the mid-range overwhelmed many riders, launching the bike forward with violent acceleration and barely any warning. Wheelies, slides, and unintended overtakes became common, especially for riders who weren't used to two-stroke power bands. But it wasn't just the engine. The RD500's early aluminum frame was light and stiff, but it wasn't perfect. Reports from seasoned riders suggested flex and instability during hard cornering or rough road riding. It wasn't literally cracking in half, but the chassis could feel unpredictable under pressure. Paired with stiff suspension and narrow tires, the RD500 demanded race-level precision to ride fast and survive. Another issue? The power valve system, the AEC automatic exhaust control, occasionally stuck, especially on poorly maintained bikes. When that happened, power delivery became even more erratic, turning an already aggressive machine into something borderline feral. The Gamma never had massive production numbers, and it wasn't officially sold in the US, but in the hands of those who imported and rode it, the message was clear. This wasn't a commuter bike. It was built for victory laps, not traffic lights. If you weren't ready for a 500cc GP replica with minimal rider aids and razor-edge handling, the RD500 Gamma could absolutely catch you off guard. It didn't fail often, but when it did, it punished hard. Number 12, the Ducati 916 SPS, a motorcycle so fast, so advanced, and so temperamental that pushing it to the limit sometimes meant crossing the line between control and catastrophe. This was not a beginner's bike. The 916 SPS was Ducati's race-bred homologation special, designed for superbike competition and barely tamed for the street. With its 996cc Desmodromic L-twin engine, lightweight chassis, and track-focused geometry, the SPS was a weapon in the hands of pros and an unpredictable beast for everyone else. But here's the catch. The very things that made the 916 SPS brilliant also made it dangerous. Its Desmodromic valve system, while high-revving and efficient, demanded meticulous maintenance. If valve clearances drifted or belt tension was off, the engine could suffer top-end failure. Not a guaranteed seizure, but sudden loss of power wasn't uncommon for riders pushing past redline without regular servicing. Miss a scheduled adjustment and the results could be brutal. The SPS was also known for its razor-sharp handling, which sometimes crossed into twitchy, unstable behavior at high speeds. Combine that with a stiff race-style suspension and you had a bike that punished hesitation and demanded perfect inputs. Hit a mid-corner bump hard, the bike might shake. Get on the throttle too soon, the rear could step out fast. While some lightweight bodywork on track-prepped 916s used carbon fiber, the core trellis frame remained tubular steel. Strong, but less forgiving than modern alloy designs in a crash. Riders sometimes mistook the bike's feedback as confidence-inspiring, only to find it overwhelmed them when pushed. The 916 SPS wasn't unreliable, but it was uncompromising. It required constant vigilance, precise maintenance, and rider skill to match its intensity. Ducati would go on to refine these traits in later models, but in the SPS, performance came with an edge, and many learned the hard way. Number 11, the Kawasaki H1 Mach III, the bike that earned the nickname Widowmaker, and not just for show. When Kawasaki released the H1 Mach III in 1969, it shattered expectations. A 500cc two-stroke triple that made over 60 horsepower, it could outrun most cars and most motorcycles in a straight line. In the era of muscle cars and speed wars, it was the motorcycle world's answer to brute force performance. But that performance came at a price. The H1's power band was a thing of fear and fascination. Below 5,000 RPM? Tame. Above 5,000? It turned savage. The sudden surge in power felt like a light switch being flipped, launching the bike into unintended wheelies or spinning the rear tire. For unprepared riders, it was like stepping on a landmine at speed. But the real issue? The chassis wasn't ready to handle that kind of muscle. The frame was basic and flexed under stress. The suspension, primitive by today's standards, couldn't control the bike's violent power delivery. At speeds above 80 miles per hour, riders often reported wobbling, weaving, and unpredictable behavior. Sudden shifts in throttle or direction could trigger instability fast. And then there were the brakes, drum brakes, front and rear, on a machine capable of reaching 100 plus mph in a heartbeat. Fade was common. Panic stops were unreliable. In emergency situations, riders often found they had the speed, but not the stopping power. While the nickname Widowmaker might sound dramatic, it wasn't entirely undeserved. Accident reports and rider anecdotes from the 1970s frequently cited the H1 in high-speed crashes, especially among less experienced motorcyclists who underestimated its wild personality. It wasn't that the H1 was defective, it just demanded respect and punished those who treated it like a regular bike. Smooth roads, skilled hands, and constant focus were non-negotiable, because once the power band hit, it was all or nothing. Number 10, the Laverda Jota 1000, a high-speed European powerhouse with one Achilles heel: its brakes. In the late 1970s, the Jota 1000 was the fastest production motorcycle on the planet. Built by Italian manufacturer Laverda and powered by a fierce 981cc triple, it could top 140 miles per hour, a serious number for the time. But while the Jota had speed and swagger, stopping it was another matter entirely. On paper, it had the goods, triple Brembo disc brakes, but in practice, riders often complained of brake fade, and not just under race conditions. Prolonged or aggressive street riding could generate enough heat to drastically reduce stopping power. The brakes didn't always fail entirely, but under repeated use, their effectiveness would diminish alarmingly. For a motorcycle that encouraged high-speed touring and aggressive riding, this mismatch between acceleration and deceleration was dangerous. Several contemporary road testers noted that hard braking from high speeds could quickly overheat the system, leading to longer stopping distances and white-knuckle moments. Combine this with the bike's stiff suspension and weight distribution, and the Jota could feel like it was fighting you under hard braking, not helping you. Skilled riders could manage it, but for anyone expecting modern braking reliability, it could be a painful surprise. There are no widespread recalls or catastrophic brake system collapses on record, but the pattern of rider complaints, magazine reviews, and anecdotal crash stories all point to a recurring issue. The Jota could go fast, sometimes faster than it could safely stop. That made it one of the riskiest machines to push hard, especially on public roads. And while Laverda fans still praise its raw character and brute force appeal, even they admit you needed a long stretch of road, strong hands, and a plan for how to stop. Number 9, the Suzuki TL1000S, a bike that earned a reputation not for lack of power, but for how violently it handled it. Released in 1997, the TL1000S was Suzuki's answer to Ducati's V-twin dominance. Its 996cc liquid-cooled V-twin engine pushed out around 125 horsepower, more than enough for a thrilling ride, but the problem wasn't under the tank, it was under the seat. Suzuki equipped the TL1000S with a unique rotary rear damper instead of a conventional shock. On paper, it saved space and offered smoother performance. In practice, the rotary damper could overheat during spirited riding, reducing its damping effectiveness dramatically just when riders needed it most. The result? Sudden instability at speed, especially under hard throttle or rough pavement. The most infamous symptom, violent tank slappers, rapid side-to-side handlebar oscillations that could send riders flying. These weren't just small wobbles. At speeds between 90 and 120 miles per hour, the TL1000S could feel like it was trying to buck you off. Period reviews warned riders about the unstable handling. After multiple reports of crashes, Suzuki responded with a factory recall that added a steering damper to control the head shake and improve stability. Later models included the fix by default. To be clear, the TL1000S wasn't a death machine for every rider. Many owners loved its raw character and torque-rich performance. But it was a bike that punished overconfidence, and if you rode it aggressively without understanding its quirks, it could turn feral in a heartbeat. It's one of the most vivid examples of how small engineering decisions, in this case a non-traditional shock design, can have massive consequences on rider safety. And it reminds us that the line between innovation and instability can be razor thin. Number 8. The Yamaha FZR1000 EXUP, a machine that blurred the line between superbike brilliance and structural risk. Launched in the late 80s and refined into the early 90s, the FZR1000 EXUP was a revolutionary leader bike. Its 1002cc inline-4 engine pumped out around 145 horsepower, and its EXUP valve system improved low-end torque without sacrificing top-end performance. It was fast, advanced, and a favorite among serious riders. But that cutting-edge performance came with growing pains, particularly in the early years of aluminum frame design. Yamaha used a lightweight Delta Box aluminum frame to save weight and sharpen handling, but early production runs revealed the limitations of that frame under repeated high-load conditions. In aggressive riding scenarios, hard acceleration, racing, or even track days, some riders reported frame cracking or flex, especially around the weld points. To be clear, there are no widespread reports of frames breaking in half during acceleration under normal street use. However, structural fatigue and cracking were documented in high-stress applications, particularly when the bikes were pushed to their performance limits over time. In later models, Yamaha quietly reinforced key areas of the frame and swing arm, indicating they had taken note of these stress-related failures without issuing a high-profile recall. The upgraded designs improved rigidity and long-term reliability and helped restore rider confidence. So while the FZR1000 wasn't inherently a death trap, it did walk a dangerous edge, pairing a race-capable engine with a frame that had to evolve rapidly to keep up. Riders who pushed it to the limits without regular inspection could find themselves gambling with fatigue that wasn't visible until it was too late. It's a reminder that when performance outpaces durability, the real danger doesn't come from the engine. It comes from the structure holding everything together. Number 7. The Honda VF1000R, a machine that punished confidence and proved even experienced riders aren't immune to betrayal. In the mid-1980s, the VF1000R was Honda's ambitious answer to the superbike wars. It featured a liquid-cooled 998cc V4 engine with gear-driven cams, endurance racing aesthetics, and aerodynamic bodywork. On paper, it was a masterpiece, but under that fairing, a mechanical time bomb. The VF1000R was heavier than its rivals, tipping the scales at over 600 pounds wet, and its handling was less forgiving at speed. But the real issue lay in Honda's early V4 engine architecture. The cam chain tensioner problem from the earlier VF750 and VF1000F models cast a long shadow. While the VF1000R had gear-driven cams, which addressed cam chain stretch, it still shared reliability concerns from the broader VF lineup, especially regarding engine heat management and valve train tolerances. Experienced riders who pushed the VF1000R hard found it didn't always respond as predictably as its competition. Sudden front-end push in corners, high-speed weight transfer issues, and difficulty controlling the bike mid-turn caught even veteran riders off guard. While catastrophic engine seizures were rare, the VF1000R demanded discipline, not just experience, and punished overconfidence brutally. Its deceptive sense of stability at lower speeds gave riders a false sense of control, but once the pace picked up, the VF1000R could become unsettled, not through failure, but through engineering compromises. In endurance races and spirited street riding alike, it challenged riders to constantly adapt. And when mistakes happened, its weight and complexity meant recovery was far harder than with more nimble bikes. The VF1000R earned its Expert Killer nickname, not through a long list of mechanical deaths, but by humbling the very riders who thought they could tame it. Powerful, beautiful, deceptively challenging. The VF1000R wasn't broken, but it reminded everyone that even legendary brands can build machines that fight back if you're not completely dialed in. Number 6. The Bimota Tesi 1D, a futuristic dream with fatal flaws. Bimota is known for pushing boundaries, and in the early 1990s, they took a radical leap with the Tesi 1D, a motorcycle that ditched conventional forks in favor of hub-center steering, a system designed to separate braking forces from suspension movement. On paper, it was brilliant. In execution, it was terrifying. Instead of telescopic forks, the Tesi used a front swing arm connected by a maze of linkages. This allowed for more precise geometry and minimized brake dive, in theory. But the reality was a front end that felt disconnected from the road. Riders often described the steering as vague or numb, making it hard to gauge grip or feedback during cornering. Worse, the complexity of the design introduced reliability issues. If the pivot bearings or linkages weren't perfectly maintained, steering response could degrade, and in rare cases, bind under stress. There are rider reports of unexpected front-end resistance or hesitation mid-turn, particularly under hard braking or aggressive lean angles. The Tesi wasn't prone to sudden lockups or catastrophic failures en masse, but its experimental steering created unnatural feedback that punished rider instinct. That made it especially dangerous for anyone unfamiliar with its quirks, even skilled motorcyclists. Combined with high weight, twitchy throttle response, and a short production run that limited real-world testing, the Tesi 1D became a cautionary tale in motorcycle design. The benefits of hub-center steering never outweighed the unpredictability it introduced, and the concept virtually vanished from production bikes afterward. The Tesi didn't kill through mechanical collapse. It killed confidence, and at speed, uncertainty is lethal. Number 5. The Kawasaki KR1S, a two-stroke time bomb that took no prisoners. Launched in the late 80s, the KR1S was Kawasaki's answer to the lightweight race replica craze. It looked the part, screamed like a banshee, and delivered exhilarating performance, but it came with a catch, one that could toss you like a rag doll. The 249cc parallel twin two-stroke engine was designed for maximum power at high RPM, and it delivered at the cost of reliability. The KR1S became notorious for catastrophic engine seizures, often without warning. These weren't slow failures. We're talking about sudden lockups that would send the rear wheels skidding, then grabbing traction violently and launching the rider over the bars in a brutal high-side crash. What caused the seizures? Often it was a combination of poor oiling, aggressive tuning, and fragile internals. Even minor misadjustments in the carburation or oil-to-fuel ratio could push the engine into dangerous territory, and the KR1S wasn't exactly forgiving. It demanded obsessive maintenance and exacting conditions to stay healthy. To make matters worse, the power valve system, designed to broaden the power band, could stick open, causing sudden and uncontrollable surges of acceleration. In the middle of a corner, this was a recipe for disaster. While skilled riders could tame it, the KR1S punished complacency. Its twitchy chassis and ultra-lightweight frame, paired with a peaky engine, meant every ride was a gamble. Miscalculate your gear or throttle input, and the bike could turn on you in an instant. Today, the KR1S has a cult following, not for its dependability, but for its raw, untamed spirit. A reminder that speed without margin can become a missile without a guidance system. Number 4. The Suzuki GSXR1100, a superbike legend with a terrifying flaw. The GSXR1100 was a brute, fast, loud, and iconic. It earned its place in history as one of the most powerful sport bikes of its era. But beneath the speed and swagger was a dangerous truth. At high speeds, this bike could try to shake you off like a wild horse. Early models, particularly from the late 80s and early 90s, had chassis geometry that struggled to contain the bike's escalating horsepower. As the engine grew more aggressive with each generation, eventually pushing 145 plus HP, the frame and suspension didn't always keep pace. The result? At speeds above 120 miles per hour, riders began experiencing violent high-speed wobbles, often escalating into full-blown tank slappers. These weren't just minor twitches. Riders described the front end going light, handlebars oscillating side to side with bone-snapping force, and control becoming impossible. Without modern electronic rider aids, surviving these moments came down to luck, reflexes, or both. The long, flex-prone frame paired with relatively soft suspension contributed to rear-end instability. When accelerating hard or encountering crosswinds, the chassis could twist subtly, but enough to send the bike into a deadly oscillation. Wind tunnel testing later revealed that aerodynamic lift at the front added to the instability, compounding the risk at high speeds. Suzuki did address these issues in later models with stiffer frames and improved damping, but the reputation stuck. Despite the danger, the GSXR1100 gained a cult following. It was raw and unapologetically fast, but it demanded total respect. Push it too hard and it could bite back in the most unforgiving way possible. Number 3, the Yamaha RD500 LC, a two-stroke rocket with a split personality. The RD500 LC was Yamaha's street-legal version of its Grand Prix race bike, and it didn't hold back. With a V4 two-stroke engine producing around 90 horsepower in a lightweight chassis, it promised thrilling performance. But what made it exhilarating also made it terrifying. The power delivery was wildly unpredictable. Below 6,000 RPM, the RD500 LC was tame, almost docile, but once the revs climbed into the 6,000 to 8,500 RPM snap zone, all hell broke loose. The power didn't come on gradually. It slammed into the rider like a freight train. Throttle control went from manageable to nearly impossible in an instant. That violent mid-range power surge overwhelmed the chassis, suspension, and even experienced riders. The lightweight frame, while nimble, wasn't built to handle such aggressive torque spikes. Under hard acceleration or exiting a corner, the rear wheel could lose traction, sending the bike fishtailing or high-siding with no warning. The lack of traction control or modern electronics meant you had to ride with perfect timing or risk being thrown off. Many riders found themselves caught in the power band unprepared, especially during overtakes or tight turns. One wrong twist of the throttle in the danger zone, and the RD500 LC would lurch forward unpredictably, disrupting balance and control. Yamaha had packed Grand Prix fury into a street bike, but without the rider aids or refined balance we take for granted today. The RD500 LC wasn't evil. It just required absolute discipline. Failed to respect it, and it would remind you it came from the world's most dangerous racetracks. Number 2, the Moto Guzzi Le Mans 1000, a beautiful brute with a dangerous secret. At first glance, the Le Mans 1000 looked like a solid old-school sport touring machine, but underneath the iconic design lurked a set of engineering quirks that could turn cornering into a nightmare, especially for riders unfamiliar with its shaft drive dynamics. Unlike chain or belt-driven bikes, the Le Mans used a solid drive shaft to transfer power from the transmission to the rear wheel. The problem? Torque reaction. Under hard deceleration or aggressive downshifting, the rear end would lift unexpectedly, destabilizing the bike right when traction mattered most. This made tight corner entries and emergency stops feel twitchy and unpredictable. Then there was the longitudinal V-twin layout. The engine's crankshaft spun in line with the bike, generating significant gyroscopic force that resisted quick steering inputs. Fast transitions felt sluggish. The front end resisted turning, and riders had to fight the machine to change direction. While experienced Moto Guzzi fans learned to anticipate it, new riders were often blindsided. As if that wasn't enough, the Le Mans also featured a linked braking system connecting front and rear brakes through a shared circuit. It sounded advanced, but in practice it removed independent control. Riders couldn't modulate brake balance the way they were used to. In emergency situations, it sometimes caused abrupt weight shifts that unsettled the chassis. Combine these elements with a nose-heavy design and a long wheelbase, and the result was a motorcycle that constantly fought back in corners. Riders unfamiliar with shaft drive or integrated brakes could easily get caught off guard, and when you're offline on a heavy bike with unpredictable dynamics, recovery can be difficult or impossible. The Le Mans 1000 wasn't a death trap, but it demanded full respect, careful planning, and an understanding of how its mechanical quirks could fight your instincts. Ride it like a modern sport bike and it could punish you fast. Number 1. The Harley-Davidson V-Rod. Not the deadliest bike on this list, but deceptively dangerous in all the wrong ways. Unlike the mechanical death traps we've covered so far, the V-Rod didn't suffer from structural failures, engine seizures, or brake system catastrophes. No, its danger came from something subtler: misleading expectations. Designed in partnership with Porsche, the V-Rod's 1,131cc liquid-cooled V-twin was nothing like the air-cooled thumpers Harley riders were used to. It revved higher. It made more power, over 115 horsepower in early models, and delivered that power in a much more aggressive sport bike-like curve. Riders coming off a Softail or Dyna weren't prepared for how violently this engine could pull. Its low-slung, drag-style frame, long wheelbase, and forward controls made it look like just another cruiser. But those same features also made tight turns awkward, mid-corner corrections difficult, and aggressive riding tricky. Pegs scraped easily, and the front end felt vague and light at speed, especially on uneven roads. Add to that a riding position that encouraged straight-line speed rather than control, and you've got a recipe for mishandling. Accident reports and insurance data from the early 2000s showed an unusual pattern. Many V-Rod crashes involved solo riders accelerating hard out of corners or misjudging braking distances in urban environments. Inexperience, especially with the bike's unique dynamics, was often the real culprit. The V-Rod didn't kill through engineering flaws. It lulled riders into a false sense of security. It looked like a Harley, but it rode like something else entirely, and that disconnect caught more than a few owners off guard, sometimes fatally. To its credit, the V-Rod was reliable, powerful, and ahead of its time, but it also demanded a completely different skill set than most Harley riders had ever practiced. If you treated it like a typical cruiser, it would bite back hard. These 13 machines proved that the greatest risks often come wrapped in the most appealing packages. Beautiful engineering, impressive performance figures, and sleek designs can hide fatal flaws that only reveal themselves when physics takes control. Every motorcycle represents a calculated risk, but these particular machines calculated wrong. From frame failures to brake system collapses, these bikes demonstrate how experimental technology can turn deadly when pushed beyond safe limits. Even the V-Rod, ranking as our least dangerous bike, has claimed lives and demands serious respect from anyone who rides it. Which of these bikes terrifies you most? Let us know in the comments below. No matter your skill level, respect these machines and always ride within your limits.